Welcome to Nature Calls, Conversations from the Hudson Valley. Our team's goal is to present science-based information about gardening and all things nature in New York's Hudson Valley. Hosts Jean and Tim, along with team members Teresa and Linda, are master gardener volunteers for New York's Columbia and Greene counties. So if you're interested in gardening or nature, or nuggets of information about what's happening outside your door, settle in. Enjoy the conversation. Whatever the season, we have something to say.
Hi, this is Nature Calls, Conversations from the Hudson Valley. I'm Jean Thomas.
And I'm Tim Kennelty.
And today we're visiting with Becky Polmateer, Cornell Cooperative Extension Program Director. We've had Becky with us before, and she was kind enough to agree to chat with us again. This time, we're looking at the phenomenon of food insecurity. Welcome, Becky.
Thank you for having me again.
So, Becky, Jean always requires definitions. It's just something we have to deal with around here. So maybe you could define for us food insecurity. Do you use the FDA definition or do you use another definition?
So there are a number of definitions that exist, and I'm going to say they're all correct because it really is the context and how they're being used. Personally, I define it as not having enough food to eat so that a member of a household has either ate less or skipped meals because of it. However, I am a huge fan of letting people self-identify. So if at any point somebody says they needed food-related help, I wouldn't require them to explain. For example, some people might actually have plenty to eat, but it's not healthy food. So to them, even though their bellies are full, they're still food insecure because they can't afford fruits and vegetables.
Okay, while we're defining things, let's look at food deserts. We hear a lot about that when they do the programs on TV. And how do they come about? I assume poverty is, as usual, a huge factor.
So a food desert does actually have a very specific definition from the USDA, which is a low-income census tract with a substantial number or share of residents with low levels of access to retail outlets selling healthy and affordable food. So poverty plays into what's considered a food desert, but also the number of people that are there, the location, and access. So for our area, the only place that's considered a food desert is Hudson. That being said, without the technical definition, access and affordability are major hurdles for many low-income residents in Columbia and Greene counties. And we do know there's a significant number of people in both counties living in poverty. So as of the recent census, that's 11.2% in Greene County and 10.2% in Columbia County. I don't want to get too bogged down, though, talking about poverty, because food insecurity exists for people who live well above the poverty line. There can be a number of reasons why somebody finds themselves food insecure. Right now in our area, I'm going to say we have a perfect storm going on. So housing has become not very affordable in the area. Food prices are going up, and a lot of the pandemic relief people had has gone away. So I think it's just really important to highlight the fact that food insecurity is an issue in Columbia and Greene counties, even if it doesn't seem obvious.
Okay, so let's talk about health problems that result from food insecurity, because you talked about maybe not having the most nutritious food, not just not having food. So like obesity and special food restrictions if you're in poor health. And are there special considerations for seniors as well for something like this?
So I'll address the senior part first. So seniors have access oftentimes, so you probably have heard about like Meals on Wheels, congregate meal sites, which just means that you can get the food that would be served to you from Meals on Wheels together in one place with your friends. And we do have that in both counties. If there's interest in that, I would really recommend reaching out to the Department of Aging. That being said, so when we're talking about health and its relation to food insecurity, what we're talking about is something they refer to as the hunger-obesity paradox. So this is where, because the least healthy foods are cheaper, that food insecure people living in poverty or low income tend to have higher rates of obesity because they can't really afford healthy food. So they rely heavily on foods to just get their bellies full, and we know that that's going to be the higher fat and sugar content food.
Okay, I've heard of food swamps too. I like deserts, and now we got swamps going on. What are they?
So those are communities oversaturated with unhealthy food options. So if you've ever gone somewhere and it just seems like on every corner there's a fast food restaurant. If you go into the bodegas or the small convenience stores, again, nothing but unhealthy food options and like a lack of other grocery stores or farmers markets or the availability of healthy food. So again, lots of food options, but if none of them are really healthy, we're running into an issue.
So are there programs, I'm going to assume there are programs in place to try to alleviate this?
So when we're talking about food insecurity, a lot of the ones that people think about are the big kind of governmental backed programs. So the big ones are SNAP, which is what food stamps used to be referred to for people who aren't aware. So we have SNAP, we have WIC, which is for families who pregnant, birth, I think to about 3, can be supported with additional food through WIC. So those are 2 programs that are available across the country. They have very strict guidelines on who can get them and benchmarks on you have to make this much money or less than this amount of money in order to get them. For those that do not already receive them and might have an interest or think they qualify, one of the things I really recommend is what we call a NOEP coordinator. NOEP, N-O-E-P. In order to apply for something like SNAP benefits, you have to go through a whole process. You used to have to go to the Department of Social Services. It can be very intimidating, very difficult. This NOEP coordinator exists who actually will come to you. They'll come to your house and help you apply for SNAP benefits and without having to go through the rest of the going down to DSS or really, like I said, they'll come straight to you. In our counties, that's a program run by Catholic Charities. And with all of this, as I'm talking, what I would say is if people are interested and want more information, they can actually reach out to us and we can give them the contact information for all these agencies.
So you're like a clearinghouse.
Yes, yeah.
So is there a website that you would steer them to use you as a beginning step?
So I would encourage people that if anything I'm talking about today, if you want the names, the contact names and numbers, they can reach out to me at the office here. And that my direct line here is 518-622-9820, extension 117. And I'll help them get to where they need to go.
Kind of navigate the process.
Yes.
I mean, there are other agencies. You talk about federal. There are other agencies and there are other not-for-profits, right? I mean, I know my sister works with the food pantry in Syracuse. There are other groups like that are helping as well, correct?
Absolutely. So there's a number of like food pantries, what we refer to as congregate meal sites, which it just means that food pantries, you're going and getting the food to bring home, where a congregate meal site is you're going somewhere and they're serving you a meal. And then we also have free and reduced lunches at schools here. So probably a lot of people are familiar that during the pandemic, they extended that to all school children across the country. But actually before that, most of the schools around here had such a rate of children living in poverty that a lot of the schools qualified for free and reduced lunch for every student. So that's actually something that's been available for most of our school. Most of the schools around here qualify. And what it is actually a grant program they've been getting for years, where I believe it's if 80% of your kids that attend would qualify for free and reduced lunch anyway, they just say you can just offer it to everyone.
So what does that mean, free or reduced? Does it mean that you're standing in line and you're not paying, or does it mean you're paying $1, or it depends?
So around here, you're not paying anything.
Oh,
so kids just go get their lunches and they're not charging anything. In some places, reduced actually means that they pay a discounted amount. But around here, I've mostly only heard about schools receiving free. It's a great program, and it alleviates a lot of issues for families where you got a guaranteed breakfast and lunch for your child.
And do they do the backpack weekend thing as well?
Some of the schools do. So that's again grant funded. It's really dependent on which school we're talking about and if a program has been created for them. So again, with all of these things, including the food pantries, the congregate meal sites, we actually have compiled the lists of those agencies and places in Columbia and Greene counties. It can be found on our website, but again, you can give me a call and I'd be happy to help you navigate that system because it can get very confusing because they're all open at different times. Some of them have very strict guidelines and actually ask for income. Others, you just show up and get a whole big box of food. So,
and do any of the schools, I know that they used to in this area, have gardens where the kids grow vegetables and they can eat them at lunch, or is that not happening anymore?
That is happening at a number of schools, and we are involved with that. The 4-H program actually does school partners in gardening, which is we help give some trainings and things for the schools that have school gardens. But again, it's not every school. So,
and I assume it doesn't go a long way. I mean, you can't plant that many vegetables, right? It's more about the gardening than it is about the food, or no?
Yeah, yes, it's like a combination of the two, is to give kids that chance to learn how to garden. And it's enough to have the kids taste and kind of see that difference between the canned
right.
versus the fresh out of garden. We know there's a big taste difference.
Well, the nutrition education, is vital because if you don't, nobody teaches you, you're going to
and where
Twinkies.
It came from, right? Then it's not, the carrots are not from a can; they're from the soil, right?
Yes, absolutely. And this probably would be a good time to bring up nutrition and the adult programs available, because what we are seeing around here, especially, which is amazing, is a lot of the food pantries and places like that are offering really fresh, really local produce and just fantastic healthy food. But if you've never learned to use it and somebody hands you a butternut squash, you're probably not going to know what to do with it and how to eat it. So we do have a regional, we call SNAP Ed team, and that's a nutrition education team that comes into Columbia and Greene counties, and their whole role is to discuss nutrition with low-income residents and teach them how to actually cook and prepare some of these products. And they do sometimes go to the food pantries and set right up and be like, okay, what do you have today? And then people actually can come in, see how you cook that particular produce and leave with recipes.
So they're actually doing a demo of like cooking squash or something like that?
Sometimes. Again, it depends, because again, the food pantry, some of them are larger than others. So,
well, I know a lot of them give out recipes now because they're aware that why would you give this stuff away if people aren't going to know how to use it? We were talking to the girls from Cooksaki Community Garden, and they have a couple of their beds reserved for the food pantry. So volunteers from the food pantry can run it. They also have beds that they're donating. If somebody doesn't have the money but want to do it, they will make arrangements that people can come, and they will help them learn how to do the gardening. So the outreach is pretty awesome.
Yeah, that's very cool. That's what I was wondering. It's like, because there's so much fresh produce in the area, do any of the CSAs donate, or do any of the farmers donate? Is that something that to the food pantries? Is that something that you can talk about?
Yes, and we definitely see that. Again, depends on the one. There's so many that food pantries that people don't even realize exist, that some farmers, they'll donate directly. Some CSAs will see that too, that they'll donate a share of their CSA to a local food pantry. And then there are a few not-for-profits around that are doing gleaning. So that's, they go to the farm and help.
I don't know what gleaning is.
So gleaning is, how grocery stores only really like to sell that really like perfect produce, but the other produce is perfectly good to eat.
It might have a bruise on it or something. Yeah.
So gleaning will be, they'll go to a farm and offer to help the farmers sort their produce, and they'll actually take the produce that can't be sold other places. So, the stuff that the farmers aren't going to take to the market or something like that, they actually will take it and then donate it.
So I have a question about kind of the other end, which is not the people coming to the food pantries, but do you have information for people to volunteer if they wanted to go glean, for instance? Or, because we have a lot of gardeners who might want to do something like that on the other end and volunteer.
So if somebody's interested in volunteering, again, I'd have them reach out to me and I'd help make that connection and tell them this is where you could go and talk to them, because they want to make sure it's the one in their area. It's some of the surprising parts is that there's actually one food pantry around here that the gleaning they're doing. I talked about farms. They're actually gleaning from restaurants in New York City. So once a week, they go down with like a truck and go to a number of restaurants in New York City and take produce.
So people are being really creative, it sounds like.
Absolutely.
That's great.
And at the end of the day, this food that environmentally would have been food waste, which is another issue altogether, is now
methane
actually getting to where it can be used.
What about deer hunting and things like that? Is that something that's donated to, or people just, it's too foreign to eat venison?
It can be. I have heard of that before. I think the main thing with that is if somebody's interested in donating, they enjoy hunting, but they don't necessarily enjoy the meat. I would connect with the food pantry first to make sure that they are willing to accept wild meat. And also, they probably would want it properly butchered.
Right.
Well, I know a little bit about that. DEC and the state troopers, and I guess other police organizations, will harvest and collect them. So if you hit a deer, the trooper gives you the option of donating it. And then somebody picks it up, and usually they go to organizations like the veterans, and they're very careful that they are done correctly and safely. But it is absolutely an option. Okay, now we've got children and seniors and congregate feeding with the seniors and the children in their... What about all the random people? Soup kitchens. I know there's some of those around as well.
When I said congregate meal sites, I meant like the soup kitchens as well. So there are a number of those. I know some of the churches have meals like once a week that they offer. There is a Salvation Army over in Hudson that has meals.
Columbia County Recovery Kitchen. And they serve 900 meals a week. There's a place in Greenville called Stone Soup Kitchen, and I think they're once a week.
So a lot of them are like once a week.
Yep.
But again, we could help people navigate that and learn, because it's the same with some of the food pantries as well. And so sometimes it's helpful for people who are really facing down food insecurity. They had a sudden expense they had to take care of, and now they blew their whole food budget for a month. We can actually help them kind of navigate that system.
And the volunteer opportunities are massive in all these different directions. And one of the ones that I tend to harp on is Meals on Wheels. The volunteers who are driving these meals around to senior citizens are other senior citizens. We could use a few younger drivers, I think, doing some of those kind of things.
Yes, absolutely. So I know most of these organizations are always looking for volunteers or donations. So it's good to reach out and figure out, like, okay, locally, where are these agencies? Because there are the obvious ones, like we talk about Catholic Charities, Community Actions, the nonprofits, 501c3s, we expect. But there's also other kind of random organizations who have taken it upon themselves and said, this is a need. So I really do encourage anybody who needs it or just wants to volunteer. Again,
You're the go-to person, right?
Well, it's more like a clearinghouse. And I say us, but you could actually reach out to pretty much any other organization that kind of does similar work. And we actually, in Columbia and Greene counties, work very well together, most of the nonprofits, human service agencies. And so we believe in no wrong door. So the idea here is you can pretty much call any of us and we'll help connect you to where you need to go.
Because it seems like half the battle is kind of finding the right place or the right timing or all of that, right? And that's complex.
It is, and that is half the battle. And what I really want to commend Columbia and Greene counties, because I don't think people realize how unique it is here, how much the not-for-profits and the human service organizations work together. Here we have interagency days, and we just are always in communication, so we can make sure people get where they need to go.
So I know we talked about farmers. What about farmers markets? Is that something different that farmers markets do in terms of food insecurity?
Yes, and it's not every farmers market. So again, it always pays to check before you go, but a number of them accept SNAP benefits. So you can go and use your SNAP card and actually use that to buy and purchase directly from the farmers at farmers markets. And even some of them sometimes, like I know in the past, Hudson had a grant where for every $5 in your SNAP benefits you spent, you got an extra $2 to spend at the market. So it actually helps stretch it a little
How
bit
would
more.
somebody know that, though? I mean, do you promote that? I mean, that's really interesting, but it's kind of like I wouldn't think of that as being a logical thing that's happening. So if I'm somebody who wants to go get some fresh produce and I have SNAP benefits, how would I even know that?
So the markets themselves usually promote that. So if it's one that accepts SNAP benefits and you go to their website or listen to radio message, they'll probably say that. The other thing that exists are farmers market nutrition program, which are actually checks for fresh produce that goes to seniors. There's WIC checks that families use at the markets. So there's a number of options that exist. But again, it can be very confusing and hard to navigate. So I encourage people, if they already don't use those benefits at a farmer's market, that they should reach out. And again, we can help navigate that, because with the checks, it's not even just what markets accept it. It's not every vendor accepts them. So
Well, that's more education, too, because I think the perception is that farmers markets are more expensive to go buy your produce rather than go to the corner market or something. A lot of people expect, from ignorance, that a farmer's market must cost more.
And that's not the case. I'm not going to say there's not specialty products there that cost a little bit more. And I will say there are some limits with SNAP spending in general on what you can use that for. And it's the same at farmers markets. So you could go to a farmers market and pick up your produce, but you couldn't use your SNAP benefit if there's somebody there selling like tacos out of a stand. Right. You wouldn't be able to do that.
Well, we were just talking about the community gardens. We will have available a list of community gardens in both counties. And we've got information for Meals on Wheels and Capital Roots and, of course, Becky's phone number. One of the things I found in my research is NAPED, Nutrition Outreach and Education Program. Is that part of what you've been talking about?
Yeah, so that's SNAPED. So SNAP-Ed is the regional nutrition team. So we do have SNAP-Ed educators, one that actually is from Dutchess County and one that's actually from Ulster County that comes into Columbia and Greene counties and does programming. And they're great, they're excellent, and they're always willing to go out to community locations. So if any community partners are listening to this and would really like to get a nutrition educator in or a local school, they will do that.
Well, this has been kind of reassuring. We know that there's lots and lots of people out there trying to help.
It sounds all really good, but is there anything missing? Like, what would you do? Create more community gardens? There's a lot of open space in the county. What would you do to make it even better in terms of fresh produce and things like that?
There could always be more community gardens and things like that. But what we have seen some startups attempting, and what might be very successful in an area like this that we might be missing, is actually a mobile market. So in some areas, they actually have mobile vans. They call them like veggie vans that drive around, and they're like farmers markets that people can use their SNAP benefits and stuff at. I neglected to mention part of this whole conversation in Columbia and Greene counties is also transportation. So it's all fine and good to have community gardens, to have food pantries, to have options, but people can't get there.
Yeah, it's crippling. If you don't have wheels, you're really in trouble.
So how does that happen then? I'm intrigued. Like, how would that happen? Is it a grant, or is it Gene and I renting a bus and driving around with what is it? How's that happen?
So a lot of times it's a grant. Sometimes it is somebody who's already doing some of the work to just kind of say, okay, we're going to get a van, and obviously there's more to it. You have to really outfit it, and there's a lot to running these type of places. So when you ask what's missing, I would say that's it, but it's not like as simple as snapping your fingers and somebody just hasn't tried it. There's a lot of moving pieces to it. So
Capital Roots in the Troy area is phenomenal, and that is one of the things that they do. They do so many things. I've got them listed here because even for ideas.
I was going to say, we've worked with Capital Roots in the past on some things. As of right now, they do not come down to our area.
No, but for ideas, I mean, if somebody wants to if Tim wants to take his car out and deliver vegetables to random people, he can talk to them and find out how to do it, because they do have a veggie van that's what do they call it, a rolling community market or something, farmer's market. And so there are, and vending machines. They're doing things with vending machines that are very interesting.
Rolling Grocer 19 existed for a little while in Hudson that was doing this work. So I don't want to negate that there isn't this happening in Columbia and Greene counties. It's just we could use more of it.
Always. Becky, thank you for giving us all this wonderful information.
Thank you for having me again.
that concludes another episode of Nature Calls, Conversations from the Hudson Valley. We would like to thank Sandra Linnell and Devin Connolly from Cornell Cooperative Extension of Columbia and Greene counties for production support. And a special thank you to our listeners for joining us on this episode of Nature Calls, Conversations from the Hudson Valley. You can find links to any of the topics mentioned in this episode at our website at ccecolumbiagreene.org. Comments and suggestions for future topics may be directed to us at columbiagreenemgb@cornell.edu or on the CCE Master Gardener Volunteers of Columbia and Greene Counties Facebook page. For more information about Cornell Cooperative Extension of Columbia and Greene Counties, visit our website at ccecolumbiagreene.org or visit us in Hudson or in Acre. Cornell Cooperative Extension provides equal programming and employment opportunities